Oh, there's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Well, this is my last new bookish t-shirt to debut. There's one more coming in the mail, so if it arrives, I'll wear it next week. Otherwise, this is it for a while, and this one kind of says it all, doesn't it? Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I'm outside. The sun is just dancing around and getting bright and bleaching me out and moving around and going under clouds, so please do not adjust your set. I slept until 20 to 7 in the morning Friday. That is so late for me. And I had a long nap yesterday. Yeah, I'm getting caught up on some sleep, I guess. I don't have any chatty personal stuff that is fun or interesting to share this week, so let's go right to the book, shall we? Well, you know what I have? This is a geeky technical problem. So if you're not interested in listening to it and whatever, if that's not your bag, go into my show notes. I have several months ago, well, this morning, what was I talking about? If you're not interested in this kind of stuff, I need some suggestions, and it's about my microphone, my external microphone. Here it is. And it's a blue Yeti. It's a green Yeti. It's a blue Yeti. And I've had it for, it's a $200 microphone. I've had it for years. And this is not a new problem, but it seems like it's happening more and more. And I won't find out if it's happening with this video until I get home and check. But it's with the blue Yeti, to make it work on an iPad, which is what I do all my filming on, you have to buy a little converter to plug in the USB into something that is a lightning converter. And that's a $25 thing that I bought 3 years ago. And so I don't know if that's the problem with that, but I need some advice. Because lately it seems like it's about 40% of the time. Before it was about 30% of the time. Even though the light comes on when I plug the microphone into the iPad, it actually doesn't record it, and I'm still being recorded through my iPad built-in microphone. It's usually audible enough, but I'm always disappointed because it's such a much richer, more beautiful sound. makes my voice sound better if it's picking up. And it seems like it's getting less reliable, but the light comes on the microphone to say that it's working, but yet it still doesn't record. Any advice? Should I replace the converter thing from USB to Lightning, the little thing that connects it to my iPad? Or is there something else I need to do? Like clean out is the thingy that it plugs into on the side of the iPad. Is that dirty? How do I clean that? Like, any advice? If the light didn't turn on, then I would know if there's a problem with the microphone or the cord or something, but it turns on. Okay, enough of that. I would appreciate any advice. Okay, well, the sun is less severe than it was a few minutes ago. Let's get cracking. I have one bail to tell you about, and this was quite a sudden decision, and one that I will never ever regret. I bailed on The Shadow King by Maaza Mengiste. I read about, I don't remember now, I think I read about 40 pages, 34 pages now that I remember, and I just really hated the writing and the characterization. And I'm just learning to respect my judgment, even though it would seem to other people, and in fact it may well be, a snap judgment, a premature judgment. I don't care. If I don't like the way the character's being revealed to me, or what's being revealed to me about the dynamic between the characters, but this one just smacked of such superficial characterization. There was an unhappy marriage, and that just was irritating from the first get-go, the way that was. I want nuance, and if I'm seeing the absence of nuance in the opening pages, with all the stuff I'm reading and all the books I have to read, get it out of my face, and let's pick up the next one. So, nope. And I'm not going to replace it. There's nothing else from Ethiopia that I think I want to read right now. I think I'm now down to about 26 books that I'm reading at one time. If something like that for Invisible Cities doesn't work and I don't have anything else that I can just pull off the shelf, I'm just going to skip Ethiopia for now. And I'm very interested in reading good literature from Ethiopia, and I'm also really interested in Ethiopian history, which I don't know very much about. and Ethiopian food. Oh, here's a thing that I have been craving Ethiopian food. I didn't try Ethiopian food until a few years ago here in Tokyo. There is an Ethiopian community. There's at least 2 great Ethiopian restaurants. One is a kind of a mom and pop one, and it's set in the Ethiopian town where there's a small community of Ethiopians. And I mean, it couldn't be more authentic. And I went there with Lindsay and a couple other friends 2 years ago, and I loved it. And I never got back there, and then the pandemic hit, and I'm just craving. The first thing I do after I finally get vaccinated, no appointment yet, is go back there. Ethiopian food is to die for, but this book, not so much. I have finished 2. I have finished the Romanian novel, Passport by Herta Müller, translated from the German by Martin Chalmers. And I didn't really like it. I didn't hate it. I give it 3 stars. But, at least it was readable compared to the other one, The Heart Is Not the Only Hunter, I think, that I tried before, which I couldn't finish. But Herta Müller is not for me, I have decided. And she is a Nobel Prize winning author, so this is just me. It's not about her, I don't think. Although this book doesn't have much more than a 3-star average on Goodreads. I'm just not in love with the way that she tells the story, which is milking a poetic image very slowly and quirkily. In this novella, it was the image of an owl, apple tree. At a very glacial pace, she threads the image through a story. I got the mood, I felt the mood. This is a book about a small town in Romania that is largely populated by a German-speaking minority. And it's kind of like a ghost town. It's set fairly, I'm not sure exactly when, but close to the end of the Ceausescu regime. And people just want to get out to the west. And in order to do that, they have to bribe the officials that can issue them a passport. And so this is primarily a story of one family, a grown daughter and fairly elderly parents, and what they have to do to get the paperwork signed. And it's degrading and it's a bleak story. But if it had been told more conventionally, with more of the aspects of literary prose fiction conventions that I respond to, it would have been made a much deeper impression on me. I mean, the writing / translation, it's very good, just not my style. So that happened. I finished for the 1900 to 1950 readathon. When was that? Last year sometime? Virginia Woolf's short stories, The Mark on the Wall, and other stories, and other short fiction. And I gave it 4 stars. There were too many of these stories that were like 1 or 2 page long, and that just doesn't work for me. Like, why bother? I think my favorites were The Mark on the Wall, which is one of my favorite short stories of all time, Kew Gardens, and a few others that when I look at the list of them, I'm not recognizing them by title, but I think she's more of a novelist than a short story writer, with the exception of, I would say, A Mark on the Wall and Kew Gardens. I don't think I'll remember the other short stories in here for very long compared to her novels. But it was a delight to read, and the ones that I loved, I deeply loved. I know Virginia Woolf is not a writer for everyone, and she's not a writer for me all the time. I picked up The Waves to reread it, having such fond memories of how deeply it affected me when I was in my 20s. I couldn't get into it and I bailed, but I will try it again. I think I have to be in the right mood for Virginia Woolf. The novels of hers that I've read and loved, and that would primarily be Mrs. Dalloway and To the Lighthouse, have affected me deeply. She's a favorite, but when the time is right. And I have started 2. I was only supposed to start 1, but something happened, as often is the case, and it's fabulous. So let me tell you about the 2 that I've started. Heidi of My Reading Life and I have started our buddy read of this book about Indigenous issues in a Canadian context. Indigenous Rights, A Guide to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit Issues in Canada by Chelsea Vowel. And oh my God, this woman can write. This is such a reader-friendly, it reminds me of Thomas King's The Inconvenient Indian in the jocular, the humorous tone with which she is guiding the white settler reader, because that's who needs to read this, through the issues, assuming they know very little and that they need some hand-holding. And she does it with sarcasm, with irony, with humor, and with such clear writing. Heidi and I did part one, which was, there was an introduction, and then part one was 2 essays. One about names for Indigenous peoples, and which she has called Just Don't Call Us Late for Supper. And the second chapter is names for non-Indigenous Canadians, called Settling on a Name. Settler, Settling on a Name. And just a joy to read. And I recommend, even if you're looking at North American context for about Indigenous issues, this is the go-to book based on 3 chapters. Heidi and I have read 2 so far, but as I mentioned last week, we read chapter 4 before we read the Métis history book, which is about Métis issues, and it was also a delight. So next week, can't remember if we're doing 2 or 3 next week, but the next chapter is called Indian Status in Canada, called Got Status. That's a big, big, thorny issue in Canadian culture and politics, and even more so in Indigenous culture and politics. Oh boy, this is fantastic! So the one that I didn't completely expect to start, but I knew it was going to be starting soon, was this is a buddy read, my first ever, with Bob the Bookerer, and we are reading the novel that Eric Carl Anderson raved about on his channel a few weeks ago. Not the one he hated a couple nights ago. That was a great review too. But the one maybe 10 days ago. The South African novel, The Promise, by Damon Galgut, a gay white South African writer. Eric just loved it, and he gave his review, and it was so infectious, so just I needed to read it, having watched his review. And I've read Damon Galgut's The Good Doctor, which I quite liked, and that's all I've read. But this screams Booker long list, so Bob and I have started buddy reading it. I think we'll be done in time that when the long list is announced, we'll have a very solid opinion on it. And I don't know if we're going to do a joint review or a Zoom chat about it. I have no idea, but we are reading it. It's, I believe, 4 chapters. If you've seen Eric's review, you know that, or if you've heard anything about this book, I love the structure of it. It's about the life of an Afrikaner family, and each chapter, I believe there's 4, maybe 5 chapters, is about the death and funeral of one member of the family. And so it hops from year to year based on the death of somebody in the family. And the central issue is that the woman who dies first, she extracts a promise from her husband as she's on her deathbed that their black South African maid, who has been so good to her, and especially during her last illness, but for decades before that. Actually, to where I've read up to page 20. It's not specified whether it's a house or a piece of land or whatever, but that she'd be left something, and her husband promises, and then the story goes from there. Wow, I love it so far. 20 pages, early days, but oh my goodness, it's such a Sean book, and I may have found my Booker winner before the long list is even announced. And how delightful to be embarking upon a buddy read with Bob the Bookerer. So that's what I've started. Because I finished 2, I get to start 1, even though I started 2 last week. I know, but I'm still slowly getting my current reading down to a manageable, less ludicrous number of books being read at the same time. Now am I disappearing into the... Have I got this sun halo, and I think you can still see me. Yeah, you don't need to see me. If you can't see me anymore, consider yourselves lucky. Let me just finish this video. Oh, I'm going to be actually starting 2 because 1 is a replacement of a weekly buddy read of short stories. So that one I don't count because I finished the one with Joe Smith. And we are going to start the next one. And this is going to be a quick buddy read because there's only 3 short stories in this little book. Just to give you an idea of the size. There is the hardcover of the Damon Galgut novel. And here is this collection of short stories. And these are stories from Indonesia. I gotta find out how to pronounce the author's name, don't I? Yes, I do.
Pramoedya Ananta Toer.
Pramoedya Ananta Toer, and he is one of Indonesia's most well-known writers, and this is Independence Day and Other Stories, translated from the Indonesian by Willem Samuels. 3 short stories. Toer died in 2006 as a fairly elderly gentleman and wrote more than 30 books, that all of which had been banned in Indonesia at various times. He was an anti-colonial, so he was incarcerated by the Dutch colonial authorities and again by the other dictators that came after that. Finally freed in 1992 and died in 2006. Okay, so a little bit of an interruption, but you know it's summer when the cicadas make their presence known. That's what you're hearing. And I have never double-checked that. Am I mispronouncing it? I know Doris and other people in the States call them cicadas, but I call them cicadas. And apparently I'm the only person in the world who does. The American pronunciation is cicada, and the British pronunciation is cicada. I guess I will switch to cicada. No more ch. Boy, a lot of pronunciation insecurity in this video. What else is new? But I couldn't understand all the news about cicadas in the States in the last 6 months or whenever that was. People were talking about it being the first outbreak or whatever, first manifestation of cicadas along the eastern coast, was it? In 18 years or something. We have them in Japan every year. As soon as the rainy season's over, they start coming out. This is just intermittent. Within a few weeks, I won't be able to film outside for a few weeks because there will be a million cicadas doing that, and it just doesn't work. So I'll have to film inside, both because it'll be too hot for a few weeks and the cicadas are just ridiculously noisy. Anyway, I don't know why there is a person using a wheelchair on the cover, but that intrigues me too. And I'll have something to say about the very first story, which is 50 pages out of a 92-page book. My first impression on the first story, which is half of the book, next week. And I am so excited to finally be starting this. I've been looking forward to it. Everybody that's read it, I think, everybody that's read it that I've ever heard of is so excited about it. And it's their book of the year, or if not one of the best books they've ever read type of reaction. Noopiming, The Cure for White Ladies, I love the subtitle, by the Indigenous writer who very uncomfortably and provocatively resides in Canada and would contest almost everything about Canada. Go, Leanne. And I finally recently learned how to pronounce that very difficult to pronounce middle name in her tripartite name. Leanne Betasamosake Simpson. Do I have it right?
Betasamosake.
Betasamosake Simpson. Leanne Betasamosake Simpson. And this is apparently very innovative. It is not written in a traditional Western novelistic way. It's very experimental or very indigenous. I'm not sure. I can't wait to dive in. It's also it's a mix of prose and poetry, and shows her deep, abiding commitment to Anishinaabe life. And the main character is transgender or non-binary. Pronouns are right there on the plot synopsis. They, them. Oh, I can't wait. So that's what's going on, folks. Let me see if there's anything I want to... I haven't discovered a new channel this week, but I'm sure that I have watched some great videos that I'd want to tell you about. Good morning. Good morning. YouTuber.
Huh?
YouTube.
YouTube ね。
Yeah. うるさい？
うるさくない。初めて。
初めて。
Good morning.
Good morning.
どこの国？カントリー？
カナダ。
カナダ。
はい。英語の先生。英語の先生。
英語の先生。
はい。
English teacher?
English teacher.
カナダ。
カナダ。行ったことありますか？
ない。私行ったのはね、トルコ、エジプト。エジプト、トルコ行った。あとね、ドイツとね、あとはね、イタリア。
イタリア。
南イタリア。イタリア。一番ね、トルコが良かった。トルコ。
いいね。
乗って。
近いの住んでいますか？
そう。個人レッスン？イングリッシュは。個人レッスンでやってる。教室？大きい何人も。
生徒とか、英会話とか、会社とか。Nice to meet you. Bye bye. Oh, that was so sweet. So what have I seen that isn't about the British royal family that I would recommend to you? I haven't watched it because this was a video where I thought, okay, I just want to read the book and then come back and watch it. Tilly of Tilly's Shelf has just put up a video last night, Gender and Racial Tension in Belinda by Maria Edgeworth. I had never read Maria Edgeworth. I think I'd probably start with her most famous book, but the name has gone out of my head, but that sounded interesting. Brian of Bookish has a video up about the Zelda and her husband, whose name is not very important, but Zelda Fitzgerald and her doofus of a husband, their unhappy marriage. It's called Sex, Sickness, and Manuscripts. I put it in a comment without watching it yet to say, am I going to need a cigarette after this? I have not left a comment on Matthew of Mayberry Book Club, but he did a riff on my page 112 tag about one of his favorite authors, the French writer whose name I don't know how to pronounce. Celine? Celine, okay. I have watched many of the mid-year book freakout tags, and also the one I put up my take on the Books and Life tag. One of the ones I've enjoyed very much, and it gives me another chance to shout her out because she deserves thousands more subscribers than she has, is Heather of Soggy Expat Book Nerd. Her mid-year book freakout tag was a delight. One of these years I'm going to participate in Jane in July. I love Jane Austen, but I haven't been in the mood to start rereading her stuff, or even to read some of the juvenilia that I haven't yet read, but I think I've read all of her major novels. Maybe next year. And I am undecided yet about whether this is a Sean tag or not, but I do want to shout out regardless. I enjoy watching these videos very much, and this is an original tag by Scott and Nell of Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, the cancel culture tag. And I've been tagged in it, but I kind of avoid talking about this kind of controversial stuff. My opinions are a mixture of hey boomer opinions and very militant opinions, and they don't all cohere. Maybe that's would make an interesting video. It's a lot of these issues, the last person I talk to influences my opinion, so I keep going back and forth. Bob the Booker also is the only other one I've seen, I think, so far, and Mark Nash did one that I haven't watched yet, so I'll link all those. Book politics, I think, are just not my bag. I have a personal aversion to reading racist stuff or whatever, but getting down into the weeds about what gets the young people on social media all aflutter, I tend to stand back for most of that. So, lots of good stuff happening on BookTube. You should put your book down once every hour and watch one or two videos and then pick your book up. That's what I'm going to be doing this weekend, as well as making a few of my own. Thanks for watching.